The Liberty Weekly podcast is brought to you by Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom. Sick of losing arguments with your statist friends? Fear no more. Now you can vanquish your intellectual foes with courses taught by top libertarian professors. Tool your intellectual arsenal and enroll today by navigating to www.libertyweekly.net/Liberty Classroom or by following the link in the show notes page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Liberty Weekly podcast. I'm your host, Patrick McFarland, here with you today with a short little podcast episode. At least that is my plan. I was going to come out with an episode yesterday, but followers of the Liberty Weekly podcast on Twitter will know that during my recording block time, my upstairs neighbor came home and started doing aerobics. Which is fine, and actually leads into the topic of the episode today, which is be ruthless to the things that do not matter. And the inspiration for today's episode, the topic, I suppose, is the fact that I started practicing around with Stoicism, which is a personal philosophy that was created by Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and a whole bunch of ancient philosophers. I know that Tom Woods has talked about Stoicism on his podcast, Tom Woods Show. He had, I think, a state representative that came on who is also a libertarian who practices Stoicism. And basically, Stoicism is delineating what in your life matters and what are things that you have control of and what should you feed your attention and your time and effort into. And I developed this because I'm trying to transition into a real adult here as I'm about to finish law school. And I think this is a struggle that a lot of millennials have to deal with because we're a very odd generation. And I know this is collectivized language, but millennials are a very odd generation, and I feel like we got screwed over quite a bit, especially when it's drudging through public schools. And I've been in school for about 20 years now, and it's hard. Once you're so situated to being in school and being a proto-human, it's very hard to break out of that mold and to become a real adult in doing stuff. And so that's something I've been struggling with in the last few weeks of my own life. Just making the realization that I have to take control of everything and take control of my schedule and take control of my thinking and take control of my life, essentially, in order to pass the bar exam, which is coming up for me this July. So it's an interesting journey, and it has led to this. And I'm hoping that this will help me kind of take that next step here. But I want to share, I thought that these teachings could not only benefit me, they could also benefit you in the audience, because there are a lot of good lessons here for anarcho-capitalist types or voluntarist types, because we essentially have to drudge through the normalcy of all of the garbage that's out there in the media and in politics and deal with other people, and a lot of it are things that we don't need to waste our energy on. And I struggle with this myself, as I've been saying. And one of the first lessons of Stoicism here is control and choice. And I'm going to read the first. I'm practicing from the Daily Stoic. It's a book that I purchased. In the first lesson on the first day, it's like a calendar type thing. But the first lesson I'll read is a quote from Epictetus. I think that's how you pronounce it. But this is the quote. "The chief task in life is simply this, to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control and which are internals that have to do with the choices I actually control. Where then do I look for good and evil? Not to uncontrollable externals, but within myself, to the choices that are my own." And that's such a big lesson that I think that a lot of libertarians and ANCAPs can take, because we are such a splintered kind of niche group. And, well, I don't have to elaborate all this to you guys, because I'm sure a lot of my listeners already know the struggle. Dealing with politics and dealing with people that are normal people and have no freaking clue, and a lot of which don't want to have a clue. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the current political climate? You just need to, it's so simple. You just need to separate the things that are out of your control from the things that you can control. And the lesson is simple, but the application is not very simple. And that's something that I've been dealing with too. And this kind of leads into another point that I wanted to bring up, is that social media is toxic. Social media is fucking toxic. And I've realized this. So a few years ago, I gave up Facebook. And it was one of the best decisions that I'd ever made, because I realized that Facebook was making me unhappy, and it was making me angry all the time, and I was butting my heads up against people, and it's just, you see, it's like they shove all this negative crap into your face on a constant basis, and it really is toxic, and it really has a negative effect on your day-to-day. And of course I replaced Facebook with Twitter, and I made this realization last night, is that, I got out of Facebook, but Twitter is evil in different ways. And it's a lot of the same mechanisms at work, but it just is focused on constantly shoving things in your face that don't matter, and interacting with people. And there are a lot of good interactions I've had on Twitter and Facebook with individual people, but the whole group, when you get into that situation where there's just shit being sprayed from all sides about certain topics, and especially in our sphere, in the libertarian sphere, is getting on with people that disagree with you on like fractions of a degree. And well, I mean, everyone knows what I'm talking about. Just the fact that people who agree on 99% of things can fight so viciously on that one little detail, and a lot of times it's just semantics, and these are not productive things, and these are things directly within our control too. I mean, you can't control what other people are going to say and do, and you can't control other people's reactions, and you can't control the fact that the news cycle is there, but you can control how much you expose yourself to it. And again, I'm trying not to lecture, because I am a student of these these teachings as well, and I am far from a master. And I guess, the whole reason I'm seeking to learn from these things is so that I can overcome this in my personal life too. But I've kind of come to the crossroads here with the podcast, where I have to be on social media in order to promote and to get people to view my content. And that in of itself is, it sucks you in a certain sense. So I'm trying to employ this thing, and I was thinking about this last night, where I'm only limiting my exposure to social media to a certain period of time per day, or a certain time limit, because there are things that I have to do, but just sitting on Facebook and Twitter, even if it's up in the background, is just toxic, man. It's just toxic. It sucks everything out of you, at least from what I've noticed recently. And so this wants to lead me to the day 2 of the Daily Stoic. Education is freedom, okay? And here's the quote, again from Epictetus. What is the fruit of these teachings? Only the most beautiful and proper harvest of the truly educated, tranquility, fearlessness, and freedom. We should not trust the masses who say only the free can be educated, but rather the lovers of wisdom who say that only the educated are free. And I tweeted this on Twitter the other day because I think it's so, it hits right at home, especially to the things that libertarians care about, because we care about, reading, we care about Murray Rothbard and Mises. And one common thing amongst libertarians that I've always noticed is that we are voracious, we are thirsty for knowledge, we're hungry for knowledge. And this is something that is very good, obviously. And this is one of the best things about the libertarian movement, is that we are proactive people. And I don't say that to, well, at least most of us are. And I don't say that to brag, but that's just kind of that's the movement. That's the inherent, you have to unlearn everything and then relearn the truth. And that takes work. And a lot of us were drawn into this movement because we discovered these ideas, became curious, and devoured them. At least that's my experience. And the whole point of this is saying that there are a lot of things that we can do besides sitting on Facebook and Twitter and circle jerking, all of our arguments. That happens a lot. There's something to be said about circle jerking, I suppose. But at the same time, there's toxic. The circle jerking comes with toxicity. And there's bitter arguments you can get in over things that really don't matter too much on a forum that is not amiable or amicable to debating. You waste a lot of time on Twitter because there's only 180 characters, misconceptions, and then you get on Facebook and it's just, I don't know, it just doesn't, it's not the right forum for these kinds of conversations. And I would say podcasting is kind of the right forum, or I don't know, a debate or a television, an organized debate perhaps, or a video Skype conference debate or something like that. I think that is a better forum. Still not the best forum, but I think that's beside the point, is that we can control how much we expose ourselves to social media. We can control certain aspects of that. But instead, what we should be doing with our spare time is building ourselves and building our own knowledge and reading and consuming media that fulfills us or educates us in some way or makes us a better person. And I think that that's kind of the key, And again, I want to reiterate the fact that I don't want to be lecturing. I feel like I'm lecturing right now, but I don't mean to, because I'm kind of lecturing to myself. Like, Patrick, you need to, get your shit together, and you need to start reading more instead of wasting your time on social media or watching some kind of mindless drivel, which thankfully I don't do too much of, but I know other people do. But this is, and this is the third day. So moving on from the education portion, that is super duper important, obviously. That's how most of us got here. But the final point is the title of the episode, and it is, "Be ruthless to the things that don't matter." And here's the quote from Seneca. "How many have laid waste to your life when you weren't aware of what you were losing? How much was wasted in pointless grief, foolish joy, greedy desire, and social amusements? How little of your own was left to you? You will realize you are dying before your time." And that's pretty intense, man. I think that's maybe that's the mantra that a Stoic would live by, or at least it's something that I think libertarians, ANCAPs, and voluntarists can take to heart, is that we really do, in order to focus on our ultimate goal, which I suppose would be creating a free society, we need to be ruthless to the things that don't matter. All the little distractions on the way, all the little side roads that we could be diverted down, we need to focus on the philosophy and bettering ourselves and spreading the message to receptive ears. And that's all we can do. We shouldn't get caught up in politics. And that includes, I think, politics within the liberty movement itself, because I have not witnessed as many juvenile politics and juvenile backstabbings and drama that permeates the liberty movement in any other sphere. It's just, it doesn't it feels like high school to me, and I'm not above it. I'm criticizing it. I know that I've participated in some of it. There's, the controversies going around about Jeff Deist's speech and all that crap, but it diverts from the main point, which is spreading the messages of liberty to receptive ears. And I think at least people within the liberty movement who maybe don't like the Mises Institute or don't like, FEE or left libertarians or whatever, at least we're in the same general stadium, the same general ballpark. And all we can do is focus on, talking to receptive ears and bettering ourselves and trying to have conversations with others, realizing, and I think if we realize within our conversations, within the liberty movement, that there are things that we can control and there are things that we cannot control. So we can control our actions and we can control the tact with which we communicate with our brethren or sisters in the liberty movement. But at the end, we can't make bordertarians not bordertarians. All we can do is supply the arguments, or vice versa. and focusing on that little sliver or that other half of the liberty movement that is full on, closed open borders. Who cares? You can't, that it is an important issue, but it's a drop in the bucket and a distraction compared to the things that we could be doing, which is reading more Mises or reading more Rothbard or even reading Hoppe, for those that don't like Hoppe, read him, For those that do like Hoppe, I don't read Jeffrey Tucker. Because you can learn. If you disagree, that's fine. You can still learn though. And knowing the other side, I guess, is an important point as well. And again, I am realizing the irony of, I'm not above all of this stuff. I'm just saying that it's kind of a waste of time. And so, moreover, even more important, though, is the politics of the left-right mainstream paradigm. Completely divorcing yourself from that. And I think a lot of people in here have done that. Shedding identity politics, shedding the left-right paradigm, shedding Trump, shedding Obama, shedding, even the LP mainstream politics and stuff like that. But what I mean too is that learn that lesson, shedding the mainstream left-right paradigm, paying attention to the things that matter, like wars in the Middle East, like the slaughter and genocide in Yemen. The lesson is don't be apathetic to politics, but learn to put it in its place and to lock it up and put it somewhere. Learn to be an observer and learn to separate your heart and your mind from these issues. It's a lot easier said than done, but I think it's such an important thing for our well-beings and also for our productivity at the same time. And I think that learning these lessons will make us happier and more productive advocates for the cause of liberty. So, I hope that you all have enjoyed this episode. I said short, but it looks like it's going to clock in at around 20 minutes here. Just a few updates with the podcast. I have a lot of cool stuff planned for this weekend, although I'm super duper busy too. I have a domestic violence paper for my domestic violence seminar due on Sunday, final draft, and I think that I'm going to bring that to the podcast. I've said a lot of, things that would be friendly here, friendly to your ears in this paper, and I'm excited to present it here on the show. Also, I have started working on my Magna Carta episode, but I did a Twitter poll for the Magna Carta episode for my audience to vote what I was going to do next, but I think that the Magna Carta episode needs to be preceded by another episode on jury nullification. And so I'm still kind of wondering how that's going to play out. I'm shooting for either a next Thursday release date for that scripted episode on the Magna Carta or jury nullification, or next Sunday. But this Sunday we're going to have a special guest on the podcast talking about another thing that I know a lot of ANCAPs, libertarians, voluntarists struggle with, is dating. Because a lot of us are men. It's a big sausage fest up in here. So I'm going to bring in a special guest, a different perspective, to talk about managing anarcho-capitalism and voluntarism within your relationship with a partner who maybe is not privy to those ideas or isn't as into it as you are. And I think that will be very beneficial to a lot of people in the audience here. And again, the special guest is actually, I'll reveal it here, is Miss McFarland, my wife, and we're going to talk about our own relationship and how the ideas and my intensity and my passion for anarcho-capitalism and voluntarism reflects on our relationship. And it might be a little revealing, it might be, but I'm hoping that it will help other people and give them insight, because my guess is that a lot of people deal with these issues too in their own relationships. So we're going to tease it apart here. I think it'll be interesting and fun. And plus, her voice is way more suited to a podcast or broadcasting than mine is. You might know her voice from the intros, the Tom Woods intros to every podcast episode. She's the first thing that you hear. And I love that sound bit. It's one of my favorites. I'm glad that she did it. But so wrapping up here, I wanted to talk a little bit about Patreon. One thing that I really have been looking to do is get a podcast editor, a freelance podcast editor that can help chip in and help me edit the show so I have more time to work on the show itself instead of spending a few hours, 6 hours a week editing the podcast. I'm not exaggerating. It is quite a bit of time. And so one thing I am kind of calling on the audience for is that to help facilitate the hiring and the compensation of this podcast editor, please support our work on Patreon. You get a lot of access and goodies to the show. You can do so by navigating to patreon.com/Liberty Weekly. Other than that, we're still have our email list. I need to send out a few more emails, but if you would like to be in touch with us that way, you can sign up for our email list in the link below in the show notes page, which for this episode is libertyweekly.net/38. If this is your first time listening to the show, we are all over social media, as I just got done bashing the heck out of social media, but we do have a presence on Facebook, Twitter, Steemit, Minds, Gab, YouTube, all those. So if you just search Liberty Weekly, you can follow us there. Otherwise, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music. We're on all those podcast distribution forums. And as well, one thing that really does help us too is a written review on iTunes or any of those platforms, and also a rating. We would really appreciate that. It actually does help with our exposure within iTunes and could really help out the show that way. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode. I'm looking forward to a lot of good content in the coming weeks here, and I hope that you guys will enjoy, and I hope that you're having a great fall. Until next time.